Thank you for braving your Monday morning at 10 a.m. Good morning, Saharu and Anita. We're here to talk about two of their books. Well, Saharu's had just the one published so far, but I believe he has several other books, and we'll talk about that. Chronicle of an Hour and a Half, which, as the name suggests, unfolds over an hour and a half, but perhaps the most extraordinary hour and a half that you can imagine in the life of some individuals and a community. Anita's A Touch of Salt, disclosure, I translated this, is, well, I'm not going to talk about either of the two novels. I'm going to start by asking each of you to talk to us a little bit about the novels, but not from the point of view of an author. Tell us be the reader of your own novels, and talk to us as readers of your books. Saharu?
Well, I wouldn't have bought my own book, most certainly.
Yeah, no, try.
Well, I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, just tell us about it anyway.
Yeah, it's about. I wanted to understand what it is to be a mother in India, and I wanted to understand that from the vantage of a poor woman. Secondly, I wanted to understand this conflict between individual need for an individual autonomy in deciding what is good for one, in choosing what one should do, and the community's control over an individual's choices. So these choices are very strained where I live in Kerala, and I, through an extramarital affair, I wanted to understand whether there is a possibility in Kerala where I could bring in a mob which is triggered by an extramarital affair or rumor of an extramarital affair. In this novel, it's not quite rumor. The extramarital affair is happening. There is that person. So it's not quite a rumor. It's true. And that news circulates. And I wanted also to bring in the WhatsApp, how WhatsApp is facilitating a certain herd mentality, which is quite impulsive and turns very normal looking people into, spectators of violence or perpetrators of violence. Yeah, this was my attempt, and I wanted to do that through the perspectives of perpetrators and the immediate relatives, people those who are most related to the victim. So I chose the mother of the victim and the mistress of the victim to offer a perspective to what's going on and offer, some insight into the life in the village. Yeah. I don't explain very well my own novel.
No, that was great, actually. Yeah, and a much richer and more detailed version of what might often be reduced to a single incident. So thank you for giving us that tour. Anita, would you like to talk about your book?
Hello. Well, what initially I was thinking about was not about writing a novel or anything. I travel. You have translated my caste as the sequel also. Whenever I feel that a particular scenario, a group of community of people, their lives, they have some, they evoke some kind of interest in me. I think of traveling. I have been thinking of going to the salt makers of Run for some time. I did go, and I saw the condition, the reality in which they live, which was kind of moving enough. But obviously, a story is not thought about like that. So later when, actually I had gone for a different reason. I went to see the much discussed, the biggest statue of unity, Sardar Patel's statue. That was for another narrative of mine called Plavonjol, of the Narmada movement story. So from Kevaria, I came to Run. And from Run, when I went back to Ahmedabad, went to the Gandhi Satyagraha Ashram, the Sabarmati Ashram, which is now again in the process of redevelopment in the interest of tourists. So there I found the library, and they have displayed the chart of the route of Gandhi to Dandi March. So there, this connection happened in my brain that, does it have any connection? Gandhi's march to Dandi for making of salt and the salt makers who make manually most of the salt in India. Are these two connected? Then I realized that, well, this is the kind of thing I read, that none of the salt makers accompanied Gandhi in the march. So in my story, Tribhuvan, an Agaria or salt maker, he actually disguises himself, he accompanies Gandhi in the march. Nobody knows. Gandhi himself does not know, because when the Dandi march was planned, it was actually essentially a part of a political chapter, because Dandi march later became one of the important milestones for India's movement for freedom. So he goes and then he hides himself with the team. And the journey to Dandi has been seen from the point of view of a salt maker. So this is essentially the story. What is interesting, which readers may find interesting, is there is a weaving of the past and the present. In some places, I have heard it is being described as a historical novel. It is not. It is not a historical novel at all. It is a novel of the present. It is a novel about the development reality of India, how decisions are taken, how infrastructure is planned, how that impacts lives of people who have been at a particular place for centuries. Like in case of Agarias, who have been cultivating salt for hundreds of years. But when a sanctuary comes up, which I believe also is very essential for protection of wild horses in the Run, 5,000 hectares of land is taken over as sanctuary. There is absolutely no process of consultation with anybody. So this is where the story begins, that I am not making any comparison. While the forest department has ensured that the wild asses get their water is kept preserved for them. The migrant workers or cultivators who come from village to stay in the Run for 8 months or so, there is no assured supply of drinking water for them. It is carried in a tanker by the public health department, and if they forget, it doesn't reach. And this is essentially the point. I mean, the children sit in a school. I mean, everything is, is a part of a story. It's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. Earlier, the children's schools in Run used to be in shanties, made of clothes and made of bamboo, because in a sanctuary you cannot do any construction. You cannot use any mechanical or electrical device. You cannot do any digging. But now with the right to education having come, everything has to be spick and span. So children's schools are now located in buses. There are static buses on the desert, which are absolutely bright because you make graffitis on them, you paint them. But it is very hot for children in the month of March, April. The entire desert heats up. And unfortunately, I went on a day when the tanker had not come for days. And even the bus did not have supply of water. The diesel tank has been emptied to give space to water, a big water can. That is also empty. So you can imagine sitting in the company of thirsty children who are waiting that when they will go home and drink some water. I mean, the essential question is that these are the salt makers, and did they deserve any kind of consultation in the process of building of the new country, essentially? Then the story obviously moves to Dandi March, and I travel between present and past, and the story actually goes to Dandi, where Gandhi picks up salt. Essentially, it gets over with a present time scenario where in the imagination of the writer, there is a conflict, again, in the run area. It is happening everywhere in the country. Corporates taking over land rights of people, public property being converted into private property. Even the river bank is becoming private property. So this is the whole process. I think a touch of salt is essentially an insight into this process. And I have taken the backdrop of history as a tool, I would say, or just as a backdrop to highlight things which are happening now. I think that's briefly about the novel.
Right, thank you. So my next question is for both of you. What we are hearing is that, Anita, you definitely, but also you, Saharu, there's a social and political reality and sexual reality that lies just behind the action in your novel. So what are you pursuing, Saharu? Are you pursuing some kind of truth? What is the relationship between your novel and the truth?
I'm not questioning anything. I don't think a novelist is not somebody who questions or, he's not a social reformer. I think in story, and I like to think about my society through its most fundamental and rudimentary terms. I don't think of, this is one thing that I'll get stuck on, like I don't have any larger purposes than storytelling. Stories are rooted in society, so certainly society, its morals, its struggles, its acceptance, and its rejection of the conditions, its negotiation in between, all these do figure in. But I don't use this as to, project a certain morality or, expose certain things. I'm generally interested in storytelling. I don't think of literature as, a cardiac massage or emotional Amritanjan. I don't belong to that herd. I think over-politicization is something that I really, really, really stay away from. To answer your question, there is no larger question that I'm raising. I'm interested in a society where there are these standards, where, especially to repeat that statement that you wanted me to give, I said this in Bangalore. So somebody, I think it was Sheila who asked me, what's the reason, why did you write it? So I was telling that, Malayalis live under this perpetual fear that, someone other than me is having sex in the state somewhere, and they have to prevent it somehow. So I thought, I would give voice to that collective paranoia that somebody is having sex and I'm not the one who is having it. I'm not a very profound guy. But I do have a lot of... I take literature very seriously, and that seriousness is not, it's not reliant on some critical insight into or political insight into something. I don't treat it as activism. And the problem with being an activist, I have one standard, which is that you have to speak truth. And I do not say that out of, some moral, some kind of a deep respect for the redemptive properties of truth. I have said this somewhere because, in order for something to be uplifting upon its discovery, something has to be a mystery, and there is nothing mysterious about truth. Truth is accessible to everybody. Those who are fighting. Let's take, for example, our struggle against caste. Now, everybody says it, but at the end of the day, I believe that from my own life experiences, I believe that, at the end of the day, all those who posture themselves as radicals and progressive, at the end of the day, when the time of marriage comes, you will very well know how to do it. Both the progressive and conservatives. There is no radical departure in our societal criticism. People are not radically departing from standards in the society. You will know to choose a fair one. You will know to choose the caste. you will know that the love that we call love, whatever we call by the word love, it satisfies all these conditions. And it satisfies the conditions for those, both of those who are advocating for caste and those who are resisting caste. Because at the end of the day, we are all in this whirlwind. And this is one reason why I keep saying that, we have to think through the perpetrators. And because, it is to practice a radical sensitivity. In that sense, we all become victims. And I think it's a good thing when you are a writer, when you are dealing with literature. It's very good as a modus operandi to treat everything, as something like something that happens on stage, and you are a spectator and just narrating it, not taking yourself onto the stage and proclaim that I'm the right person I'm the best person out here, and everybody follow me. Yeah, so I have very critical opinion about over politicization of literature. I think it is denying literary merits to literature also. And yeah, not very articulate about it today, but yeah.
No, thank you for that. Yes, Anita, would you like to give us your view?
I think it is mine. My scenario is much, in a sense, much simpler than Saharu's. I am more, kind of charged by the changes I see around me. I was from a typical middle-class Bengali family. And after my study of economics in presidency and Calcutta University, I was suddenly pushed out of Bengal, and I went to Chotanagpur, which is now part of Jharkhand, then to Odisha. And then after having traveled all over Odisha, I essentially, I travel a lot, but not like a tourist. I feel I should see things on my own, because this complexity of this micro scenario in this country, the complexity of lives of different communities, their lives, their struggles, it somehow connects me to them. I mean, I am a storyteller. I entirely agree with Saharu that I don't have any bigger purpose. If I have not written something, somebody else would have written. But I try to write in my way. And, like I say this in my Bengali, to my Bengali audience, like a bird that goes out to fetch food for its younger ones at the end of the day, bringing something in its beak, maybe a grain, maybe something. So I also go out and I bring something back for my readers in Bengal, things which might not have been discussed before. So these are all essentially stories. And sometimes the push becomes so big for me that, like for lighting Plavunjal, which is essentially the story of Narmada Bachao Andolan, of which I was connected with that maybe 2 decades earlier when it started, 2.5 decades earlier. But later when I traveled, I felt that maybe I could have gone earlier. But after Sardar Sarovar was built, lot of area came under the backwaters, submergence. So villages I had seen 20 years back have completely changed. Some were underwater, some were partially underwater, and there were absolutely heartbreaking scenario of a village, which is half of it is out of water technically, and half of it is underwater. But it has not been taken over fully for rehabilitation because that is costly. So a village is divided into half, where in half the village children don't go to school. They move around. There is water, there are snakes, there is water logging, and half of the village is technically out of that area where submergence backwater is not there. So what kind of reality is this? I have moved around, I have been to people's houses, listened to them. I do not think that literature has any big role in transforming society or anything. But there are stories that I can write. I can write only what I'm capable of writing. I mean, I don't have any bigger philosophical or any greater purpose. But if something is read by people, they remember it, and there are not only readers of literature, there are other people who may be interested in this, because I would say that the picture of the country, the scenario of the country that we see in huge advertisements or the progress, there is also a counter story to that, that needs to be told. If a writer does not say in creative fiction, some non-fiction writer will write about it. So this is and I feel that there is no scope of research or field study in good literature. See, unless you are moved by what you see, unless you are drawn to people, if you only add facts and figures, which I do occasionally, it will not be literature. Ultimately, it has to pass the test of being creative writing. So I have tried that. What has happened to my writing, only time will tell. But right now, I would say I'm happy being a traveler through this time, connecting with people and writing about them, getting a lot of emotional support and love and affection from them. Very little of it comes actually. Whatever I do and see and in my stories, maybe 10-20% becomes part of my writing. Remaining of it remains within me, maybe never told in any form, I would say that. But it's very, my story as a writer is very ordinary and simple. There is nothing bigger in that.
No, I completely disagree there. I think that you bring to your stories, or the making of your stories, the kind of perspective that very few writers in India do or can do for that matter. And you've been fortunate in that your professional life as a bureaucrat, which has taken you around the country, has enabled you to witness many of these things firsthand.
No, there I will disagree with you.
Okay.
First of all, my life in the civil service has put me in the path of perennial conflict. I'm always in self-doubt. I don't know where I belong, whether I belong to the establishment or where I belong to the people, because neither of the sides trust me. That is one. Secondly, most of the traveling I have done is on my own. My job has taken me maybe when I was the district to some villages, but much later, as you know, when there are senior bureaucrats, they don't go anywhere. They can work in their room. There are people who can travel and bring back reports for them. I did not like to work for them. In a very major decision, I'll just cite this. I don't enjoy mentioning these things. When I was Secretary of Social Justice, I came to realize that a very important decision, like raising the height of Narmada, Sardar Sarovar Dam, was taken without any field visit whatsoever by any senior person. It was just taken in Delhi. And you know the consequences. Enormous consequences in turn, because Sardar Sarovar is a dam which is around 220 kilometers long. And when the height is raised by a few meters, it backwater just rushes to villages. In fact, in 2019, on 17th September, which is a very special day in India, the dam was brought to the full level in order to give surprise to somebody. And as a result, several people were washed away because they did not know, there was no warning. So when I took decisions, because I was the head of the Narmada Rehabilitation Subcommittee engaged by Supreme Court, I traveled the entire Narmada Valley again on my own. But that was not assigned by anybody, and in places I was prevented from going also. So problem is that my work has not taken me to places, but it has also opened my eyes to things which otherwise probably I could not have seen if I were, let us say, a teacher of a school or maybe a lecturer in a college in Kolkata. So I do not know how you take it, but this is how I look at it.
Yes, no, I get it. Thank you. Saharu, what is your level of participation in the lives of people about who eventually appeared in your fiction?
I mean, I live among them. I am one of them.
So you feel you're you could be part of that mob? I mean, you do have that line there, I have become the mob.
Well, I not necessarily being part of a mob. I like watching football. You could say that my only participation in being part of a mob is watching football. I generally am somebody who houses all the flaws in society, and I'm very self-reflective on that front, and I'm very cautious that I may be that person, and I do not posture myself as the best person, the model citizen, and my work also wouldn't propose myself as a model citizen. So yeah, I see myself as one of the characters, potential characters in my own novels. It could be true. Because I said this I was talking to New Indian Express, and I was telling that, a novelist should consider himself or herself as the most commonest specimen of the species, not special, not unique, not exceptional. And if I consider myself to be a common specimen of the species, it simply, stems from my understanding that, I house almost all the psychological properties other human beings have in varying degrees or intensity. Yeah, I see myself among the people. Yeah, I am among them, yeah. In fact, I am them.
So Anita spoke of this counter-narrative. I was just thinking that your novel is also a sort of counter-narrative of Kerala, at least from elsewhere in India, because we tend to see Kerala as a very progressive state.
Kerala is very rebellious on sexual stuff, I think. But on the other, in everything else, Kerala is a very good place to live.
Sorry, could you unpack that a bit?
No, I'm saying Kerala. I heard that back in a decade ago. So I remember reading in Arundhati Roy saying somewhere that Kerala's sexual repression is far worse than Kashmir. This is true. I'm telling that this is true. But on the other hand, aside from this, I don't have much counter anything to offer about Kerala. Kerala is a good place to live. This is a place I would like to live and die. I'm very safe there. I don't feel very safe outside Kerala in India, generally. I feel very good among my people.
So you talk, you're fond of quoting Borges, where you talk about what he says about writing stories vis-a-vis presenting arguments. Do you want to tell us how that has played into your novel?
Meaning, this again brings us back to the political question. The problem with assuming that you are the right person and you are the model citizen is that it all stems from something like this, that good literature, in my understanding, has to resist message, and if it doesn't resist message, it falls into this. It falls into this labor of organizing convenient characters around a model citizen or a model victim, and everybody becomes merely subservient, instrumentally subservient to the character, the good character or the good message that you want to put forward. So in that process, what happens is that your investment in sentence making, your stylistic elements, etc., all these become, very, very weak. And eventually, character, as a novelist, one has to have a capacity to, imagine very well the characters we may not agree with or like in real life. And if you turn novel writing into, a message-giving activity, essentially, you may not be able to portray people in the truth of it. Because people are very complex. I believe one single person may house, I'm not saying that, you don't judge somebody for doing what he or she is. Even essentially, I think that somebody has a control over what to do, what want to do. I was telling Jay, as I was talking to Jay at Suitable Conversation in Delhi, and I was telling that, I was quoting Origen, the great church father, that, it is within the will of all of us. It is in the capacity of all of us to choose between good and evil. I believe that people have a capacity to choose between good and evil. But, a lot of other, we can judge, as a society, we can judge for someone, who does something, let's say, a pedophile. Let's say some abominable crime, which somehow has societal sanction, which is heavily repressed in the families, But, but we all know, and we deeply detest, this behavior. And it's only a human behavior. I don't see any other animal on earth, looks at a child with a, sexual intent, except for human beings, and specifically human male. This is, let's say, I want to portray a pedophile character. Who is a pedophile? Now, how I do that? How do I do that? Let's say a rapist, another abominable crime. Now, a rapist does rape on a single day, right? Now, what is his life before that? What does he do? What is he like in family? What is his relationship with his wife, his mother? Are these people is he someone who looks at his daughter, mother, or sister as a rapist? Maybe not. Maybe not. So I believe that, in order to portray somebody, we have to have a capacity to humanize perpetrators. And this is something we may not be able to practice in real life. Literature gives you room enough to practice that, which is why Shakespeare created Shylock, Shakespeare created Iago. These are all different characters. But if essentially, Judge Holden in McCarthy's Blood Meridian says that, everything that exists without my knowledge exists without my consent. Now, this is an extreme nihilistic form of statement that, everything that exists without my consent. If I were to know that it exists, I would have killed it. Now, yeah. So so in order to create an evil character, you have to give voice to that evilness. In order to give representation to misogyny, you have to embody, you have to give voice to misogyny. You have to speak misogynistic sentences. And a writer shouldn't be judged for that. And writer also shouldn't be apologetic about one's lack of capacity to give people misogynistic traits. Literature does give you room enough for that. And a lot of people are not using that for literary purposes. Instead, they are trying to turn this into another form of activism. Literature doesn't have such a potential to impact social change. Essentially, when you are politically too correct, essentially you also are choosing a certain type of reader, which is very much like a carpenter choosing the favorite butt. This is not, a carpenter doesn't make a chair, with preference for a certain butt in mind. It doesn't happen. Just like that, a writer shouldn't choose a particular ideologically oriented reader. Writer should actively resist choosing readers. Readers are readers. Human beings are alone, they are self-critical, and a human being who is solitary is a very self-critical animal. We have to appeal to that, which is why I said again to Jay that, as a novelist, a good novel, would provoke the moderate and cool down the extremist. And it should be the attempt. And all these complexity just, is wiped off once you become, the prophet of, social change. And I think a lot of people are doing that. I may not be a good example of, offering a, alternate path. But I'm trying. I will never make my works or my ideas subservient to liberal or conservative gangs. I'll try to upset both of them because truth has a capacity to upset both.
Thank you. I love that phrase, provoke the moderate and cool down the extremists. But I'm also picking up on your idea of humanizing people through literature, which we cannot often do in real life. And Anita, before we go to the house, I'd like to ask you about humanizing saints as well, or people perceived as saints. So tell us a little bit about what little of the characters you have created out of Mahatma and Kasturba Gandhi in Salt. They do appear as characters.
I think it is the writer's interpretation and imagination. In fact, I think you are doing a very difficult job combining me and Saharu on the same dais. We are so different. But coming back to your earlier point, if I can just add, I know I was thinking about it when he was speaking, that yes, my focus in my literature, in my writing, is essentially on this development reality of this complex country. And, when you speak of the civil service, I don't want to deny that I was there, but essentially the task in civil service, the kind of jobs we do, is to not see, and if you see, you come and forget, and don't discuss things which are not pleasant, So I have tried to go against that process, which may be insignificant if an individual tries it, but at least the writing happened, so it remained. So coming back to, again, this issue of Gandhi and Kasturba, I don't think I have added much. One is that I tried to read a little more deep into lives of Kasturba because I was once requested in a seminar in Delhi to speak on Kasturba. And I said that I don't know much about her life. So the moderator said, but shouldn't you know? Are you not supposed to know? Then I read up about Kasturba's life. Of course, I have combined her view about Gandhi and my own view about Gandhi. And it is interesting that someone who is known as Mahatma, the kind of decisions he took, the reason why decisions are taken, you can see them differently as a person, as an individual, but when time sees it, history sees it, it becomes a different thing altogether. So I have not gone into so much of intricacies. I have written what I thought I'm seeing through the facts of their lives. And there is one very interesting thing which I thought I have added to the novel, is when Gandhi actually went and picked up salt in Dandi, which is a great moment. In my story, it is there that he calls Tribhuvan, the salt maker, and says, you come, stand next to me. Actually, and even Kasturba was not part of the journey, but anyway, Tribhuvan was next to him in the story. But there is no photograph. So this is all eliminated from history. Because that day, the first day of picking up salt in Dandi, there was no photographer arranged. The Gandhi's salt making photo that we see in books is actually taken after 3 days when there was a photographer. But again, Tribhuvan was not there. Tribhuvan was not there anyway. It is my imagination. So, when you interpret or make up the character of a person, it is something like that probably. The photographer being present at the right moment. I don't think I should say more than this. I think if people read the book, I'll be happy.
Thank you.
I think that novel by Robert Coover, A Public Burning, it is about the burning of the Rosenbergs who are accused of, spying the nuclear technology to the USSR. And it was a spectacular event in American history. And Robert Coover sits down and writes this 550 pages novel, A Public Burning, which is a very hilarious book about a very tragic time. Now, he, by the way, in that, I was just thinking about, humanizing. But that book remarkably satirizes and humanizes Nixon, whom, Robert Coover, I don't know Robert Coover, but from what I know about him, he deeply resents. So one has to have that capacity to humanize people we don't agree with. That's an essential part of storytelling. And in India, it's very difficult. I mean, you cannot even accurately portray people, let alone satirize. Or,
it needs lots of strength to humanize people who are...
Yes. It also is a way of accepting, ourselves as, being part of the commonest, specimen of the species.
Okay, we'll take a couple of questions if there are any. Otherwise, I have more questions. Yes? Okay, everyone's enthralled. Oh, sorry, there's one there. Yes.
Hello. I just wanted to say thank you for your book, Saharu. I really enjoyed it. I haven't read your one, but it sounds very interesting. My question was, I think it's really important to humanize people you don't agree with. But I noticed in your book that there wasn't the character who actually perpetrated the violence weren't the ones that were portrayed. And I'm wondering about your decision about there was lots of characters who contributed to the mob and characters who almost acted in a violent way, but the people who were actually attacking the man weren't given, their stories weren't told. And I was wondering about your decision to
not give voice to those who
actually
assaulted. Well, which would be very difficult to achieve in a first-person narrative. I think the only person who comes close to describing two people, one is a character named Funny, who videos it with some, and another person, Hakimaka, he basically tries to save this person. It was difficult, it was too many already, 16, 17 people, and I was worried that I would confuse the readers already. And I also am very afraid of, my novel growing out of my hand and becomes, a 256, 300-page document. I am very, very deeply aware that I do not have that capacity to entertain anybody for more than 250 pages. So I'm very serious about, my limitations, and my limitations, my incapacity, my knowledge about my limitations very informs the way I write, which is why this novel is very short. My next one is also more or less the same length. My next one is also more or less of the same length. So on the one hand, I'm afraid of going beyond a certain length, you might say. On the other hand, with this particular novel, I was worried that, it might get too chaotic. But I also think that it was not so important to make the perpetrators themselves tell the story. Whoever hit is unimportant. But the mob, people who made up the mob were represented, I believe, in a way that a novel could be used to represent them.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, the lady in...
Taking over from the concept of humanizing saints that we were discussing, when we talk about characters like the Mahatma or any other such figure in history, the opinion that we have of their character or certain perspectives that they present are often very intensely personal or subjective. But there's a certain manner in which history has portrayed them, a certain idealism that's involved. So in attempting to humanize them or bring out lesser known aspects of them which can touch a raw nerve, what are the risks that we are running, or as an author and perhaps a historian as well, what do we keep in mind? Ma'am, if you could take this.
I don't think I have delved very deep into all these things. I have read Gandhi's own writings. I have read biographical accounts of his life. Kasturuba's autobiographical. And I think that it is always difficult because I come from Bengal, where Gandhi has a very different kind of image. And for a few, even a few decades back, he wouldn't even be discussed. But things are changing now. And there are, of course, risks because, but I have not been that way, I have not taken any such risk in that sense. I have been very moderate in my path. I have just tried to blend him along with the story. As I think as a writer, it was my duty to see that even historical characters march with the pace of the story. And I have taken, if you call it a liberty, I have done that. That's all. But I think there are more serious writers who deal with historical characters or interpret them differently. They are those risk takers. I am not one of them. I am just a creative writer caught in the process.
I think, yes, Harish, the second novel, August 17, S. Harish, Malayalam writer, which does take on the historical figures.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. The books are available. Please buy them, get them signed. Have a great day.